My friend, I must tell you something that will disturb you. Something that took me many years to understand and even more years to accept. The harder you grasp strength, the more it slips away. I know this sounds like ancient riddles from old masters, but listen carefully. What I'm about to share will shatter everything you think you know about power. 3 years ago, I met a man who called himself unbeatable. Massive shoulders, muscles carved from stone, hands that could crush walnuts like paper. His gym was a shrine to his victories. Trophies covering every wall, newspaper clippings yellowed with age, photographs of defeated opponents. But the moment I walked into that room, I knew the truth. He was already defeated. Not by any fighter, not by age or injury. He was defeated by his own terror. This unbeatable man lived every moment in fear of losing what he believed he owned. His strength had become his prison, and he was both the guard and the prisoner, watching himself day and night. You want to know something strange? The strongest fighters I've ever met are often the most afraid. Not of pain. Pain is temporary. Not of losing. They've lost before. They're afraid of discovering that what they call strength, I call shadow dancing. Here's what disturbs people when I tell them this. Your entire relationship with power is backwards. You think strength is property, something you can earn, own, stack up like coins in a vault. You believe the more you accumulate, the safer you become. You imagine power as solid, permanent, yours to keep. But strength that can be owned died the moment you claimed it. It's a ghost, a shadow, a story you tell yourself to sleep peacefully in a world where nothing stays the same. I spent years trapped in this same illusion, collecting techniques like a hungry man hoarding food, building my body like a fortress against an invisible enemy, believing that if I just gathered enough power, I would finally be, invincible, untouchable, safe. But the universe, my friend, has a sense of humor. The moment you think you've captured strength, it laughs and flows away like water through your desperate fingers. Today I will show you what hides beneath this illusion of solid strength. I will show you why the most dangerous fighters appear to do nothing, why the most devastating techniques are invisible to the eye, and why the strongest person in any room is often the one who looks completely at ease. But first, you must be willing to let go of everything you think you know about power. Everything. Because what I'm about to reveal will not just change how you fight. It will change how you breathe, how you walk, how you exist in this world. Are you ready to have your world turned upside down? Let me tell you about the most dangerous trap in all of martial arts. It's not what you think. Strength that becomes fixed becomes fragile, like ice, impressive to look at. But 1 degree of heat and it melts into nothing. I learned this lesson from a champion boxer in San Francisco. This man, let's call him Tommy, had not lost a fight in 7 years. 7 years. The newspapers called him the Golden Gloves King. People crossed the street just to watch him walk by. But when I sparred with him, something strange happened. Every time I moved in a way he hadn't seen before, he would freeze, not physically, mentally. His body would continue fighting, but his mind had already surrendered to confusion. You see, Tommy's strength had crystallized around his reputation. He had become so identified with being unbeatable that he couldn't risk trying anything new. Every technique he threw was safe, tested, proven. He fought like a man protecting a valuable vase instead of like a man expressing his spirit. I watched him break that day, not from my technique, but from his fear of losing what he thought he owned. His reputation had become a cage, and he was terrified of stepping outside it. This is what happens when fighters become prisoners of their own success. They stop growing because growth requires risk, and risk threatens the very identity they've built around their strength. The strongest man I ever met was terrified of losing his strength. Think about that. The most powerful became the most powerless, all because he believed his power was solid, permanent, something he could keep. Here's the paradox that will make your head spin. Solid strength creates its own weakness. The more rigid your power becomes, the more brittle it becomes. The more you try to preserve your strength, the more you guarantee its destruction. Ice looks strong. Ice can break rocks, but ice cannot flow around obstacles. Ice cannot adapt to new containers. Ice cannot change its form without dying. Water, my friend, water is weak enough to flow around your finger, but strong enough to carve the Grand Canyon. Water doesn't fight the rock. It dances with it until the rock becomes sand. The crystallized fighter is impressive until he meets something he cannot break. Then he discovers that his strength was never really his strength at all. It was just frozen fear, dressed up to look like power. This is the first shadow I want you to see clearly, the shadow of strength that has forgotten how to change. Now let me tell you about the second shadow, one that nearly destroyed my own development. Americans collect strength like coins, but real power cannot be saved in a bank. I discovered this the hard way when I came to America. Everywhere I looked, people were accumulating techniques, accumulating belts, accumulating certificates. They treated martial arts like a shopping list. I know karate, I know judo, I know boxing, check, check, check. But here's what I slowly realized. They were collecting corpses, dead techniques, movements that had power when they were alive, when they were being born fresh in the moment, but had become museum pieces the moment they tried to own them. This is the Western mistake, believing that yesterday's victories create today's power. You think because you defeated someone last week, you are stronger today. You think because you learned a technique last month, you possess it now. But power doesn't work like money, my friend. You cannot deposit it and earn interest. I spent years trapped in this same illusion, collecting martial arts like trophies. Wing Chun, Western boxing, fencing, judo. I studied them all thinking I was building an arsenal. My mind became a warehouse of techniques and I was proud of my collection. Until I realized the trophy case was my prison. All those techniques I had mastered were weighing me down like chains. In a real fight, I would reach for a Wing Chun technique, but the moment had already passed. I would try to apply yesterday's solution to today's problem, and it would fail because the moment was different, the opponent was different, I was different. Here's what I discovered. Strength is like breath. The moment you hold it, it becomes poison. You cannot breathe yesterday's air today. You cannot use yesterday's breath to live in this moment. Every breath must be fresh, new, alive. The same is true for power. The technique that worked perfectly yesterday is already dead. The strength you had in your last fight is already gone. The power you think you own is already expired. Power that can be stored has already expired. True strength is not something you possess. It's something you express moment by moment, breath by breath. I watch fighters shadow boxing, practicing the same combinations over and over, thinking they're building strength. But they're not building strength. They're building habits. They're creating predictable patterns that any intelligent opponent can read and counter. Real power cannot be rehearsed. It cannot be saved for later. It cannot be accumulated like money in a vault. It must be born fresh in each moment, responding to what is actually happening, not what you think should happen. This is why the most dangerous fighters are often the newest ones. They haven't learned to accumulate yet. They haven't built their prison of correct techniques. They respond to what they see, not what they remember. The accumulation trap makes you rich in dead techniques, but poor in living response. You become a museum of martial arts instead of a living expression of power. Stop collecting strength, my friend. Start breathing it. Here's the third shadow, and this one will make you question everything you think you know about displaying power. Every display of strength creates its own weakness. The harder you punch, the more you teach your opponent where to hit you. I learned this from watching a street fighter in Hong Kong. Big guy, massive arms, loved to show off his power by punching through boards before a fight. Thought he was intimidating his opponents. But what he was really doing was revealing his entire fighting system in advance. I could see it all, how he generated power, where his balance shifted, how long his recovery took, even the exact angle he was strongest and weakest at. He was giving away his secrets for free, thinking he was showing strength. This is the revelation that changed everything for me. Strength that announces itself reveals its own limitations. When you demonstrate your power, you're not just showing what you can do, you're showing how you do it. And the moment someone understands how you do it, they can find ways around it, under it, through it. The mistake so many fighters make is confusing demonstration with domination. They think that by showing their strength, they're establishing dominance. But what they're actually doing is teaching their opponent their weaknesses. Every technique you reveal is a door you're opening. Every power you display is a pattern you're creating. Every strength you show is a weakness you're exposing. Here's the paradox that will twist your mind. The most impressive strength is often the most vulnerable. The fighter who can break 10 boards might impress the crowd, but he's just told every opponent exactly how much force they need to worry about, and exactly how that force will be delivered. The technique that looks most powerful is often the one that's easiest to counter. But the fighter who appears to do nothing, who shows no special techniques, no impressive displays, no demonstrations of power, that fighter is a mystery. You cannot prepare for what you cannot see. You cannot counter what you do not understand. This is when I discovered that true power works differently. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't demonstrate, it doesn't reveal its nature until the moment it's needed, and sometimes not even then. The mirror of opposition shows us that every action creates its reflection. Every display of strength creates an equal and opposite display of weakness. The universe maintains balance, and it uses your own demonstrations against you. This is when I realized I had been thinking about strength all wrong. This is when I began to understand the liquid nature of true power. Now that you've seen the three shadows of solid strength, let me show you what lies beyond them. A full cup cannot receive tea. A strong man cannot receive strength. This insight came to me during my darkest period as a martial artist. I had studied every system I could find, mastered every technique I could learn, and yet I felt more confused than ever. I was like a cup overflowing with different teas, all mixed together, all becoming muddy. One day, my teacher told me something that shattered my world. "Bruce, you must empty your cup. Only then can you truly drink." I didn't understand at first. Empty my cup. But I had worked so hard to fill it. All those years of training, all those techniques I had mastered. Was I supposed to throw them away? But slowly I began to understand. Power flows only through emptiness. When you are full of what you think you know, there is no room for what you need to learn. When you are full of who you think you are, there is no space for who you could become. So I learned to become empty while remaining capable. Not empty like a vacant room, but empty like a river, always flowing, always ready to receive whatever comes, but never trying to hold on to it. I practiced being defeated until I became undefeatable. I know this sounds backwards, but listen carefully. I would spar with opponents, and instead of trying to win, I would try to lose gracefully. I would let them hit me and study how it felt. I would let them throw me and learn how to fall. I would let them submit me and discover new ways to escape. By embracing defeat, I learned that defeat was just another teacher. By becoming comfortable with losing, I became impossible to defeat, because I was no longer fighting to protect anything. I was fighting to learn, to grow, to become. And here's the paradox that will challenge everything you believe. The most powerful technique is the one you never use. And think about it. The technique you never use cannot be studied, cannot be countered, cannot be predicted. It exists in pure potential, ready to be born when needed, but never crystallized into a pattern that can be broken. This is the shift that changes everything, from possessing power to being possessed by it. When you stop trying to own strength and start letting strength use you, you become a conduit for something much larger than yourself. The empty cup doesn't own the tea, it serves the tea. It allows the tea to be what it is, to flow where it needs to flow, to nourish what needs to be nourished. Be like water. I have said this many times, but let me tell you what it really means when applied not just to technique, but to strength itself. Water has no shape, yet it can take any shape. Water has no form, yet it can fill any form. Water has no strength, yet it can move mountains. This is the method I developed after years of studying the rigid forms of traditional martial arts. Instead of creating another system with fixed techniques, I learned to develop power that adapts rather than dominates. Most fighters train to become immovable objects. They build their strength like a fortress, solid, permanent, impressive. But what happens when an immovable object meets an unstoppable force? Something has to break. I learned to become strong without becoming rigid. Like water in a container, I would take the shape of whatever situation I faced, but I would never lose my essential nature. My fighting style changes with each opponent, like water taking the shape of its container. Against a boxer, I become flowing and evasive. Against a wrestler, I become heavy and rooted. Against a karate fighter, I become circular and soft. But I am always still me, always still water. The training for this is unlike anything taught in traditional schools. Instead of practicing fixed forms, I would practice formless movement. Instead of learning set techniques, I would learn to respond to what was actually happening in the moment. I would spend hours just moving, not practicing any particular technique, but exploring how my body wanted to move naturally. I would close my eyes and let my hands find their own way through the air. I would let my feet teach me new ways to dance. Strong like the ocean, vast, but no one can grab it. You can put your hand in the ocean, but you cannot hold the ocean. You can strike the ocean, but you cannot wound it. You can fight the ocean, but you cannot defeat it. This is the art I discovered. Strength without shape, power without pattern. Not the absence of technique, but the presence of infinite technique. Not the lack of form, but the source from which all forms arise. When you master the formless form, you become like the ocean, vast enough to contain everything, soft enough to flow around anything, powerful enough to reshape the world. Now let me share with you the most dangerous secret I ever discovered. The technique that wins is the one that was never there. I learned this from watching a master calligrapher in Hong Kong. He would hold his brush above the paper for long minutes, not moving, just feeling the ink and the paper and the space between them. When he finally moved, the character would appear as if by magic, perfect, effortless, alive. "Where did that come from?" I asked him. "It came from the space between intention and action," he said. "The technique that you see is just the shadow of the technique that you don't see." This is the concept that revolutionized my understanding of power, strength that cannot be seen or copied. Most fighters focus on the visible techniques, the punches, the kicks, the grappling moves, but the real power exists in the spaces between these actions, the power that moves before you move, the strength that strikes before you strike. I learned to fight with what isn't there instead of what is. While my opponent was preparing to counter my right hand, my left hand was already moving. While they were defending against my high attack, my low attack was already complete. While they were watching my technique, my intention was already somewhere else. This is the method. Power that exists in the spaces between actions. Not the punch, but the moment before the punch. Not the kick, but the intention that gives birth to the kick. Not the technique, but the emptiness from which the technique emerges. The paradox that will make you question everything. The attack that lands is the one that was never thrown. The strike that defeats your opponent is not the one they see coming. It's not the one you planned. It's not even the one you threw. It's the one that was born in the space between your intention and their expectation. This invisible technique cannot be taught in the traditional way. It can only be discovered through years of emptying yourself, of becoming so present that you exist in the spaces between thoughts, between breaths, between heartbeats. Here is the final secret, the one that will transform everything you think you know about strength. Stop trying to be strong. Let strength use you. For years, I thought I was the source of my power. I thought my muscles created my strength, my techniques created my victories, my will created my success. But I was wrong about everything. I am not the source of strength. I am its expression. Like a river that doesn't create the water but allows the water to flow, I don't create power. I allow power to flow through me. This is the shift that changes everything. Using the universe's strength rather than your own. Your opponent throws a punch with tremendous force. Instead of meeting that force with your own force, you become the space through which their force flows. You redirect their power, amplify it, send it back to them, transformed. And this is how to make your opponent's power work for you. Not by opposing it, but by joining it. Not by fighting it, but by dancing with it. Not by conquering it, but by becoming one with it. I discovered that the strongest fighters are not those who generate the most power, but those who waste the least power. They don't fight the river, they become the riverbed, guiding the water where it needs to go. When you stop trying to own power, it starts serving you. When you stop grasping for strength, it flows through you naturally. When you stop being the warrior, you become the way itself. This is the freedom that comes from borrowed force. You are no longer limited by your own strength. You have access to the strength of your opponent, the strength of the moment, the strength of the universe itself. The water doesn't fight the mountain. It uses the mountain's own weight to carve new paths. The wind doesn't battle the tree. It uses the tree's own flexibility to create music. Be like water, my friend. Not because water is weak, but because water is connected to everything. It borrows from the earth, the sky, the moon, the sun. It never fights alone. This is liquid power, not strength that you possess, but strength that possesses you. Now that you understand the liquid nature of true power, let me show you how to apply it in the most practical way. I don't create strength, I respond to it. This is completely opposite to how most fighters think. They believe they must generate power, create force, initiate action. But I discovered that the most devastating power comes not from what you create, but from how you respond to what already exists. Every opponent brings their own strength to the encounter. Instead of fighting against that strength, I learned to dance with it. Instead of opposing their power, I learned to redirect it. Instead of creating my own force, I learned to amplify theirs. This is the technique, power that responds rather than initiates. You wait, you feel, you sense the direction of your opponent's energy, and then you join it, not to help them, but to guide them exactly where you want them to go. The training for this is unlike anything taught in traditional schools. Instead of practicing attacks, I would practice responses. Instead of learning to strike, I would learn to receive strikes and transform them into something else. I would have sparring partners attack me in every possible way, and I would practice not blocking, not avoiding, not countering, but joining their energy and redirecting it back to them multiplied. This is how to make your opponent defeat themselves. You don't defeat them. You simply show them the natural consequence of their own actions. You become the mirror that reflects their force back to its source, but transformed, amplified, redirected. Here's the paradox that will challenge everything you believe about fighting. The strongest response is often no response. When someone pushes you, the natural reaction is to push back. But what if you simply stepped aside? What if you let their force meet emptiness instead of resistance? They would fall forward from their own momentum, defeated by their own strength. This is the art, becoming a mirror that reflects force back to its source. Not a dead mirror, but a living one. A mirror that doesn't just reflect, but transforms. A mirror that shows your opponent not just their own force, but their own limitations. The responsive power makes you unbeatable, not because you're stronger, but because you're connected. You're not fighting against the universe, you're fighting with it. Let me share with you the most counterintuitive secret I ever discovered about developing true strength. I was strongest when I looked most vulnerable. This goes against everything you've been taught about power. You think strength should be visible, obvious, intimidating. You think you should appear strong to be strong. But I learned that the opposite is true, the insight that changed everything. True strength is developed in moments of apparent weakness. When you appear strong, everyone prepares for your strength. They brace themselves, they plan their defenses, they steel themselves for impact. But when you appear weak, vulnerable, soft, they relax, they drop their guard, they underestimate what you're capable of. This is the practice, cultivating power through deliberate softness. Not the softness of weakness, but the softness of supreme confidence. The relaxation that comes from knowing you have nothing to prove and nothing to protect. I would train myself to look completely at ease even in the most dangerous situations. I would practice appearing vulnerable while internally preparing for anything. I would cultivate the art of seeming unprepared while being more prepared than anyone else in the room. This is the method. How to prepare for strength without becoming rigid. Traditional training makes you tense, ready, obvious. But liquid strength preparation makes you soft, open, invisible. I would spend hours learning to relax every muscle in my body while keeping my mind sharp as a blade. I would practice looking distracted while maintaining perfect awareness. I would train to appear slow while being ready to move faster than thought. The paradox that will revolutionize your understanding. The best defense is to appear defenseless. When you look defenseless, your opponent attacks carelessly. When you appear weak, they use more force than necessary. When you seem unprepared, they overcommit to their attack, and that's when you have them. The invisible preparation is not about hiding your strength, it's about hiding your readiness. Your opponent should never know you're prepared until the moment your preparation becomes their defeat. This is the secret of liquid strength. It looks like nothing until it becomes everything. It appears soft until it needs to be hard. It seems vulnerable until it transforms vulnerability into victory. The greatest preparation is the preparation that cannot be seen, cannot be detected, cannot be prepared for. This is how water defeats rock, not through obvious force, but through invisible persistence. Now let me reveal to you the ultimate expression of liquid strength, the technique that cannot be learned, cannot be copied, and cannot be defeated. My technique is born fresh in each moment. It has no history and no future. This is completely different from traditional martial arts, where you learn fixed techniques and practice them until they become automatic. Those dead techniques work well against other dead techniques, but they fail against living situations. The concept that will transform your understanding, strength that evolves during the encounter. Your technique doesn't exist until the moment it's needed. It has no predetermined form, no practiced pattern, no expected outcome. It's born from the unique combination of you, your opponent, and the exact circumstances of that moment. I learned this from watching children play. They don't plan their games. They create them as they play. They don't follow rules. They make rules as they go. They don't use techniques. They invent techniques in the moment they need them. This is the art, becoming formless while remaining effective. Not the absence of technique, but the presence of infinite technique. Not chaos, but creativity. Not randomness, but spontaneous order. The method is simple but difficult. You must learn to fight with techniques that don't exist yet. You must become so present, so aware, so connected to the moment that new techniques are born from the space between your intention and your opponent's response. I would practice what I called free fighting, sparring with no predetermined techniques, no planned strategies, no expected outcomes. I would enter each encounter empty and let the situation itself teach me what was needed. This is the ultimate expression of liquid strength. Power that creates itself as it's needed. The living technique cannot be anticipated because it doesn't exist until the moment it's used. It cannot be countered because it's already adapting to your counter. It cannot be studied because it will never be used the same way twice. This is why I could fight different opponents in completely different ways, using techniques that appeared nowhere in my training. The technique was alive, responsive, creative. It was born from the marriage of emptiness and fullness, of preparation and spontaneity. The living technique is not something you do, it's something you become. You become the space where new techniques are born, the emptiness where new forms arise, the silence where new sounds emerge. This is the art of liquid strength, not using what you know, but becoming what you are. Not applying techniques, but expressing life itself through the language of movement. My friend, we have traveled far together through the shadows of solid strength and into the light of liquid power. Now let me share with you the final truth that took me a lifetime to understand. The day I stopped trying to be strong, I became unstoppable. The day I stopped trying to win, I became unbeatable. The day I stopped trying to be Bruce Lee, I became myself. This is the realization that will either liberate you or confuse you completely. True strength is the absence of the need to be strong. When you no longer need to prove your power becomes infinite. When you no longer need to demonstrate your strength becomes invisible. When you no longer need to be right, you become unstoppable. The freedom that comes from this understanding is beyond anything you can imagine. When you release the illusion of solid strength, you discover liquid power. When you stop grasping for what you think you need, you realize you already have everything you could ever want. I spent decades trying to become like water, studying water, imitating water, practicing water-like movements. But the day I stopped trying to become like water, I realized something that changed everything. Do not try to become like water, my friend. Realize that you already are water. You were never solid. You were never fixed. You were never separate from the flow of life around you. You only believed you were solid because you were taught to believe it. You only felt rigid because you were trying to hold on to something that was never meant to be held. Your strength was never yours to own. Your power was never yours to possess. Your techniques were never yours to keep. They were always flowing through you like water through a riverbed, shaping you even as you shaped them. The ultimate paradox that will set you free. You are not weak pretending to be strong. You are strength pretending to be weak. You are not a limited being trying to become powerful. You are power itself, temporarily forgetting its own nature. You are not water trying to become water. You are water dreaming you are ice. The question is not how to become strong. The question is how to stop pretending you are weak. Stop trying to build strength and start removing the barriers that hide your strength. Stop trying to accumulate power and start dissolving the illusions that block your power. Stop trying to become someone else and start being who you already are. The liquid strength I have shown you today is not something you must develop. It is something you must uncover. It is not something you must learn. It is something you must remember. You are already water, my friend. You have always been water. The only question is, when will you stop pretending to be ice? This is the ultimate truth behind the illusion of solid strength. There is no solid strength. There is only liquid power, temporarily frozen by fear, melted by understanding, and set free by the simple recognition of what you have always been. Flow, my friend. You were born to flow.